I'm going to show you how to make a crumb top apple pie, which is different than a 2-crust apple pie. I cook my apples down a little bit. I don't like them to be too firm, and also if you don't cook them down a little bit and get some of the juice off, your pie will be too juicy, which, you know, everyone says, oh, a juicy pie. Well, too juicy is not good either. Okay, this is a mix of green granny, some Macintosh, and some Honey Crisp. I already pre-peeled them. I will tell you on a side note that if you get really good at this, you can take all your apple peels and make apple jelly out of it. And in another video, I will show you how. Of course, if you're going to make apple jelly, you would take all the stickers off. But you can make apple jelly out of this, and so basically you would have no waste. And I can show you that in another video. So anyways, these apples are going to go in here. It was probably about 4 medium-sized green grannies, 2 large Honey Crisps, a small Honey Crisp, and 2 Macintosh. Macintosh are the softest of them, and so they will cook down. Okay, now I'm going to start this. And you kind of want to do this on low because you're not totally cooking them. I do keep some measuring spoons and measuring devices in my containers because I use them so frequently, and that's how I do it. But other people get them out of the bag. If you're going to bake a lot, I would invest in some airtight sugar containers and not enter the bag all the time. Okay, so this calls for a tablespoon of lemon juice. Lemon juice it helps to keep the apples from browning. And this is going to be a tablespoon. Probably gonna need a little more. So, what do you do when you only need a tablespoon of lemon juice and you have extra? You can freeze it and then just pop it out later. I freeze lemon juice in ice trays, ice cube trays. And so that was a tablespoon. So, and then that way, if you need lemon juice, you can just pop it out. Okay, and 2 tablespoons of cornstarch. Cornstarch acts as a thickener for the liquid, and I would add the 2, and then you can kind of decide as it juices up how much you want to add, maybe a little more in. Okay. So this is going to cook. Okay, salt. Now we're going to get into the spices and things like that. So we're going to need a teaspoon of cinnamon. This container, you can just level it off with that. And mix it around. I do like to mix it around pretty well because it will tend to want to stick to just a few of your apples. So We'll keep mixing that. I've got to add some nutmeg. And then we'll get the salt. Okay. Some people put a little ginger in there. This is calling for a half teaspoon of this. You can add ginger if you want. Cardamom is another spice that some people use. That's a good one. There's pre-made pumpkin pie spices. If you use that, just add your totals and just scoop it out of the container that way. Okay. If you have a salt-restricted diet, I would say you can have some salt, and some of it does cook away, but it would be hard to make some dishes without salt because it adds a balance that you need. And so, all right. So I'm gonna let that cook down, clean this up, and then we will put the pie crust in the pan while that cooks. This is going to have a caramel sauce on it. Now, have I made caramel sauce from scratch? Absolutely. But I'm not going to today because this is really good and I just don't want to be bothered. I'm busy with some other stuff. So it's equal parts. I like the Smucker's salted caramel because it's kind of popular right now. I still used the same amount of salt that it called for in the recipe, but I'm going to use for cooking. I'm going to roll out the pie crust because that actually needs to go in the freezer for a little bit. And then also the apples are going to need to cool before I put them in the pie crust. So, and this, I'll do a video on pie crust soon. And if you just buy pie crust, there's nothing wrong with that. The important thing is to just start making things. So when you roll pie crust, you want to give it a turn, like a quarter turn or a half turn periodically as you roll it out. That helps it to just stay round. I haven't always made my own pie crust. I've used the stuff that comes in the package. I've made pie crust that turned out horrible. But no, I haven't always made my own pie crust. There is a method where you roll it onto the rolling pin. I've done that bunches of times, but sometimes I just lift it. It depends. You can tell by how much it's sticking to your surface if you can just lift it. At least I can. Okay. So I'm going to trim this up again. And I'm going to fold it and crimp it. And actually, the cornstarch that I added to this is keeping the juices pretty thick. So that's good. Now, again, it's 2 fingers We'll roll this up first. That'll help. Just roll this over all the way around. Okay, it's index finger and pinchers together as you go around. Okay, while I work on the filling and the crumb topping, I'm gonna put this in the freezer because pie crust does best if it's cold. So this is gonna go in the freezer and I'm gonna stir that and then we will make the crumb toppings. And then a few minutes. Smells good. So the crumb topping is 3/4 of a cup of brown sugar and 3/4 of a cup of oatmeal. Can be any kind of brown sugar, light or dark, whatever you have on hand. And you do want to pack it just a little bit. I would use, you know, the regular Quaker oats or the rolled oats. So there's 3/4 of a cup of that. Okay, let's hope that that's soft. And 3/4 of a cup of flour. You can see that they're not real runny, and some of the apples are a little still firmer than the others, but that's just Honey Crisps are a little firmer than Macintosh, and Green Grannies are a little bit firmer too. This needs to cool before I put it into the pie pan. Okay, so stir this around. So it calls for a teaspoon of cinnamon. Oops, that might be my cinnamon. Oh, I have a funny story. So I am making a banana bread, and I just reach up into my cabinet and I think, oh, this is the big container of cinnamon. No, I had them in different containers at the time. And what did I add? Roasted garlic. Not a good spice for banana bread. And I didn't think anything of it until a few minutes. I'm like, oh, I added roasted garlic. Consequently, that did not taste well. Okay, and a 1/2 teaspoon of nutmeg. Now, we're going to use a pastry blender. I've had this thing for a while. Sometimes the little spokes get goofy. But I am, and this is like semi-soft butter. It's been sitting out at room temperature for a while. So I am gonna cut this into chunks and put it in here. Okay. Now, to get this started, you do have to keep doing. There is a fork method. You could use a fork if you wanted to. I just happen to have this, so I'm going to use it unless I get sick of it. This could have maybe been a little firmer, this butter. It's a little on the soft side, but it's okay. You're trying to get a nice crumble. I learned a lot of my baking just from watching other people's videos that I liked. I'm more self-taught. Did I have a basic knowledge of stuff? Sure. because I'm that generation of women that had to take home ec back in the day, which I actually liked as a kid. But I don't think they have that anymore. Maybe they call it home sciences or something. But, you know, we learned to do things and stuff. I was probably the last generation of women that did that. Okay, I'm not happy with this, so I'm going to switch to a fork. The butter is just a tad bit too soft. And if your butter is too firm, though, you'll have a really hard time getting it to make this like crumbliness. Like powdery substance in here, but then there's also some like bigger chunks. So that's kind of the consistency you're going to want. So I'm going to wait a little while. Let this cool down, let the pie crust firm up, and then we'll assemble and bake. Okay, so we're gonna assemble the pie now. I am gonna tell you about apple pies. Sometimes they really like to bake over and make a big mess. That's one of their jobs. And so I like to put my pie in another pan, or some people make a foil like nest for it to sit in, because otherwise you're going to have a big mess in your oven if it bakes over. And you want your pie to bake in the middle rack. Probably been in the freezer maybe 10 minutes or so. Okay. So that's the crumb topping from before. Let me get a spoon. Now, okay. Oh, tip. You know, if you were peeling your apples and you got a little apple peel in there, oh, who cares? Because, you know, can't get every piece. This is cool, but still warm. So you kind of need to work quick because you don't want your pie crust to start dissolving all over the place. Okay. Now, here's the jar of caramel sauce. It says 11 ounces. You want to put 1/3 of a cup. There's 8 ounces in a cup, so 1/3 is going to be like almost 2.5. You're just going to have to judge this. I would say start out really slow and just kind of go back and forth, and I'm going to do just a little bit more. But now be very careful because you do not want to dump the whole bottle in there. And just kind of zhuzh it around. Because it's not supposed to be the whole flavor. And now some of the chunks are bigger and some are powderier. So you kind of want to evenly disperse because you don't want like a whole powdery section and then a whole section with chunks. And this is going to seem like a lot, but it will kind of cook down into the apple. If you like apple crisp, this is like one of my favorite kind of combination apple pie, apple crisp. Because apple crisp doesn't really have a crust, it just has the apples and the topping. And you know, if you were in a hustle, you could just make apple crisp. In the refrigerator. Egg wash is just 1 beaten egg and a little bit of water. It helps to brown the edges and just make it look nice. Okay. So that's ready to go in the oven. Middle rack. And I'm gonna put my timer on for 15 minutes to check for the browning of the crust. Oh, cancel. Okay, so the timer went off after 15 minutes, but the pie crust around the edge is not brown at all. So I'm going to give that a few more minutes. The pie got it about 40 to 45 minutes in the oven. About 22 minutes in, I did put the pie shield on for the crust. This did not bake over a whole lot, but you can see over here where it did, and that would have made a real mess in your oven. The other thing I'm going to tell you is this will want to adhere to the pan when it cools. So a tip is parchment paper. Okay, so I'm going to get parchment paper. I'm going to lift this off onto the parchment paper so that it doesn't glue itself onto the pan, which I've had that happen. And then I'm having to pry it off. So, and then I'm just going to set this here. I really shouldn't have gone onto a cold surface, but obviously I didn't have a problem, but you need to be careful with that. And that's it. It's apple, caramel, crumb pie.
What are you doing?